So, you ever thought what makes someone truly evil? It's a good question, isn't it? Let's find out. Cue the opening credits. Welcome to my tavern. How can I help? Hey guys, welcome to A Day in the Tavern, a wonderful podcast talking about all things geeky and nerd-tastic. It's a weekly podcast that I do, Nate, or Beardy, as some of you might more than welcome to call me. Look, I'm not even a minute into this thing of recording, and I'm already getting tongue-tied. That's how bad it is. Yes, we talk about all sorts of things geek and nerd-tastic, done by me. I've had guests on. I need to think about getting more guests on because it's a little bit slight depressing me just talking into a camera on my own for 45 minutes or an hour, however long I end up doing these videos for. But I digress. And before we get into this week's topic that I've picked, I want a little word from, well, not necessarily our sponsors, but about this, a bit more about this channel that you're watching this video on. Which, if you don't know who the Critakers are, you're watching this video off our channel, for fuck's sake. The Critakers are mostly a bunch of musicians and two of our absolute wonderful friends playing Dungeons and Dragons every Monday evening. Obviously now, with the current pandemic going on and everything, and social distancing having to be put in place, we haven't been playing live or recording our sessions to post up on YouTube at the minute, but as soon as that's over, yeah, we're coming back live stream. We'll be live streaming in the second we are able to, or the week we are able to. We coming at you live every Monday evening, roughly about 7:30 till probably 11 or something like that. Depends on what time we're kind of finishing and things like that. But that's enough for now. And welcome back. And we're back. So, as I said at the very top of the video this week, I'm going to be talking about what makes someone evil. Now, this is probably one I'm going to be spreading across a fair few different podcast episodes, simply because it's such a massive and wide topic to be talking about. Evil, the best way to describe evil sometimes is a point of perspective. It's not the exact reason. Don't get me wrong, there are things in this world that are fundamentally evil regardless, but in a point of perspective, when you're looking at like good versus evil, it is often a matter of perspective and what the person's ideal is right. As I already said, there are certain things in this world that are just undeniably evil. There's no right to them. Things which include like rape, torture, molestation, murder to a certain extent because, well, if you play D&D, everyone's essentially, any player in a D&D group is essentially a murder hobo one way or another. I've done it a fair few times myself when I've been a player in D&D, so it just kind of happens. And I'm of course talking primarily in things like the comic book world, in the film and TV world, and things like that. Things like evil is set up as the antagonist to someone's protagonist. You get this a lot more in video games over anything else. So, what defines evil? Well, I just already mentioned a fair few easily decent qualities there of what someone evil might do. And the problem with that is good men can fall into this problem quite easily. For those who kind of don't understand, go and watch The Dark Knight which is the second in the Batman trilogy with Christopher Nolan and Christian Bale. When he talks about you either die a hero or you live long enough to be a villain. It's been a big case, and if you play like certain video games, you will see that a lot with certain antagonists consistently. Now, we're here to talk a little bit about what defines evil. In a sense, and this is also partly in a sense because we kind of have to be a little bit desensitized about what bad is. I know there are people like rape victims who struggle years and years of struggling to get over the mentality that being raped causes. Yes, I get that there's that. I get that when you lose somebody through something like if someone's murdered, that's quite close to you. Again, that's a hard thing to get over. I get that. I'm not going to tear anything about those people down, even in the slightest. It's a hard thing to get over. What I want to talk about is their usage, something or the uses of things like that in pop culture. So, comic books, TV shows, D&D games, video games. You see a lot of things like that and hear a lot of stuff about that. Now, obviously, animated TV shows have a tendency and a knack of poking fun at this quite a bit. Family Guy and South Park, top two in my head, I think that they've kind of poked a little bit of fun at this. Yeah, they've had the drawbacks from it, but that's besides the point. And I'm not going to stand here and say that I condone any of these acts in real life. No, I don't. But when you're posing into the realm of make-believe, of fantasy, especially at something like a D&D table, you have to be understanding and open to the fact that these things do happen. You can't have the DM set up a bad guy and have him to be a kid's TV show bad guy. He comes in, destroys everything, no one really gets hurt, or no one you can see gets hurt, and the heroes come in and stop it. That's not going to set up, especially when a lot of adults play Dungeons & Dragons. It's not going to be a very good kind of plot hook to get people in. Simply because it's not something I would get into. It's like, especially considering that most D&D players I know, or to an extent anyways, have a sense of coming in and just destroying everything and walking out expecting being paid. But again, that's a bit digressing about what I'm trying to talk about. So the best way to kind of sum this up is you have to figure out, I mean, I'm saying summing up, this is right at the beginning, still the beginning of the video, I'm not summing anything up yet. You need to kind of point out and make points of a evil person in a fantasy world doing evil things. Video games, a lot of video games have done this in an amazing, twisted way. And I'm going to say this several times throughout the video. I'm not trying to make fun, and I'm not trying to poke at people who have gone through these kind of traumatic experiences themselves. I'm not. I'm just saying that in a certain regard, you need a bit more reason to go after this person, this evildoer, than just, oh, they're evil. Now, of course, there's several different ways you can do this. You need to understand as well how this goes about. Now, there's subtle ways that I've seen DMs, and yes, this is going to be primarily based in D&D fantasy games. There's subtle ways DMs have done, I've seen and heard about. They're very clever about how they show someone as evil. It could be quite simply that you walk in and you just see the scarred remains of torture victims and things like that, or the bloody things like a bloody Iron Maiden, or one of those racks where someone just dried blood on it and the stench of it. That's a subtle way to show that this person has tortured people, and things like that. When you go into the thing of seeing that person in the act is another thing altogether. Now, anyone who has watched Crit Takers or actual D&D games or sessions know there's one particular session that we did post up, and I had to kind of do a little bit of a warning beforehand because, well, things kind of got out of they didn't get out of hand, but they nearly did in a very dark and suggestive way. Now, understanding we are all adults, this is within the context of what the game is. Now, yes, within the game, what happened? And I'm sure you're probably asking, well, what happened in the game? I've not watched that episode because I don't watch your D&D shows. Well, one, please go watch the D&D shows, okay? Please watch the Crit Takers D&D show. It's absolutely funny. We just have a constant laugh throughout it. Even though I am trying to run somewhat of a serious campaign, we do also have all of our shits and giggles. This episode in particular, character was brought in, PC character, who used one of the particular spells that's can be often used in combat or out of combat to avert a sticky situation that the players might get themselves into. This spell was particularly used in a completely different way. It was used more to, well, take someone to bed. Not necessarily somewhat against their will, because it's a spell. It's the command spell. It's a spell that basically you cast a spell onto someone and they do what you say, as long as it doesn't long within certain parameters. But some of the parameters talked about doesn't actually say that those particular acts are against it. Now, bear in mind, this is talked about as a game for people of age 12 and upwards. So certain people of a certain age probably wouldn't pick up on that, so they don't put it in simply because they don't, well, parents. But it did happen. Now, in game, this is found out that happens. The players, oh boy, the other players kind of picked up on this. The spell was dispelled, and the player character, or the player's character, was ultimately killed there and then. Fortunately, this isn't something that can happen in real life, or doesn't happen in real life. Not the taking advantage part. I've heard dark stories about shit like that already in the past. It's not nice. I'm more talking about the before it happens and shit, the person getting killed. Now, I don't know particular motives of the player behind that particular moment. It's not something I tend to dive into for my players. Right? I can't say the fun is constantly clean. We do make a consistent round of dirty jokes, and in the game, the players do actually own a brothel. So the sense of clean fun goes out the window, especially when you're dealing with a bunch of adults playing Dungeons and Dragons. But something like that, I kind of allow at the table because it makes for social understanding. Right? Now, of course, if anyone at my table had been in that situation of they had been raped or gone through shit like that, may have been a different story. But they hadn't. The players dealt with it, moved past it, and after the break we had, the player brought up a new character he was going to play for the rest of the game before he brought his main character back in, which was fine. No problem. So, what was wrong there? I didn't have to, thankfully. I didn't, and I don't tend to explain like what happens during those moments. It's not something I tend to. It's not something I feel that's necessarily table etiquette for that kind of thing. Especially since we do record our sessions, or we did record our sessions, but soon we'll be doing our sessions live streaming. So, yeah. I personally didn't see anything wrong with that. Some people might. Don't get me wrong. There are a number of people out there who are more than happy to get up in arms about this kind of situation. Especially in Dungeons & Dragons, because, oh, you summon demons and devils with this stuff. It's all Antichrist, this and that. And it's like, this is coming from people who've never picked up a D&D book or understand how it works. It's all a role-playing game. It's all fantasy. It's all made up in our heads. Sorry, I could literally go on a rant for ages about how things like Christianity and the media just try to destroy D&D or cancel D&D, since that's the wonderful popular word at the minute. But, as I've said before, I try not to do anything on religion or politics on this podcast. Basically because it can generate so much negativity. I don't really want that. Even though, yes, I know the irony. I know the irony that I'm talking about what makes someone evil and very evil and horrendous acts, which all kind of can breed negativity. And then I'm talking about how I don't want to breed negativity. I'm not trying to breed negativity. I'm trying to make people understand that within a certain context, you can't just be like, oh, we're just never going to talk about this kind of issue at the table, or we're going to slander every game or comic book when it brings this stuff up. Now, this kind of stuff has been brought up in comic books and things like that for years. There are comic books that not even I will read just because of how gruesome they can be. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't understand, or unsure about what I'm talking about, look up the comic book series The Boys. That alone can make even the most hardened person a bit squeamish about some of the things they do. It's not a pretty sight, some of the stuff that was done in there. But it's entertaining. I like The Boys show and the comic book series. There are things even Marvel has done that have pushed the said point to an really horrible state. Doesn't mean it's wrong. No. I don't think so. And that's where we need to start coming from. That's what we need to start thinking about in the world. And not just, yes, rape is horrible. Someone gets raped, regardless male or female, because men do get raped. It's a horrible act to have happen to you. It's a horrible act to do to someone else, no matter how you feel about it. Things like torture are horrible act to do somebody, whether you're trying to seek information out or not. Things like, but in the regards and the point of fantasy and gameplay, they need to be brought to the surface a little bit more. You can't just do some of this, especially with a bunch of adults, and expect, yes, we're going to do this great, wonderful, high fantasy game. All these amazing things come to life, but we're not going to do any of that dark stuff. I'm going to be repeating myself over and over again until you understand this is what I'm trying to talk about. I'm trying to explain that this is what it is. It's fine. And in fact, my personal belief is that people need to be more encouraged to talk about these kind of things. Not because it's horrible to the victims, but because if we make a regular point of talking about it when someone in the real world does have that happen to them, they're not going to be all closed off from everybody else because it happened. They're going to be more open about it, and but good things might come from it. You might actually get rape victims who are able to open up about what happened, and the person who raped them will have justice brought onto them and things like that. Now, again, no politics, not going to go into like the dodgy, messed up issue that the justice system is going through at the minute, especially with a certain particular family who I am more than fucking fed up with. But, again, I digress. So, talked about that. So, some of the other things that need to be kind of brought out into understanding of, like, especially in Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. I've said this before. How do you expect a group of heroes to go off and slay a bad guy? An evil person. As I said at the top of the video, what defines as an evil person? Go back and look at a bunch of comic books. Read some comic books properly. But don't read it so much from the hero perspective, but read it from the villain perspective. Okay, yes, as I said, there are certain acts in this world that are deemed unreversibly evil. But what if someone who's deemed as evil, or the villain, is doing something that's not deemed irreversibly evil? What if they see what they're doing is a good thing? Like their version of good is our version of is the hero's version of evil, and vice versa. Those are the things you kind of got to think about in this kind of context. Now, especially in D&D. All right, I've got for my D&D game for when we actually do come back and we start the next, not next kind of campaign or thing, because we're going to continue on with the main campaign that we're doing, or that where we left off. But the next story arc. That's the word. I get in trouble with words sometimes. But when we kind of come back and start the next story arc that I got planned, yeah, there are some fundamentally pure evil things there, but there are things that will get brought up and talked about, done, that will be seen as, well, is that really evil? Or is that just someone doing what they think is good? These are the things you got to constantly question in these games. Let's talk a bit more about violence as well. So, here's another thing to do with, especially in geek culture. So, one of the very earliest video games I remember playing years and years ago, I must have been 7 or 8 years old. I had the first Mortal Kombat game. Or one of the first. Can't remember which one it was. But I had one of the early Mortal Kombat games. And to me, it was a 2D fighting game. That was it. You fought, you pick your character, everyone went Scorpion or Raiden because they were the best two characters to play, and you just fought. You don't need stress release as a kid, for the most part anyways. We just played the game because it was a fun game. I didn't have any violent tendencies from it when I was playing it. If I play it now, I won't get any violent tendencies from it. I won't go off and want to stab or kill people. But the media, certain parents view it that way, don't they? They view, and not just that game. I mean, that's the main game that gets pulled up on violence all the time. Bear in mind that statistics have shown that games like that help reduce anger, because people can get their anger out in game by, in a sense, beating something up in game. We can't do that in life. It's illegal. It's against the law. We can't go up to a random person in the world, beat the crap out of them, kill them, dismember them, and then just walk away. Howdy dory. It's against the law. In a video game, however, it's slightly different, isn't it? It's a slightly different situation. Go online, go on to a game, spend a few hours shooting people, killing people, dismembering bodies and things like that. Get your anger out. Calms you down. You walk away a few hours later and you're not as mad at the world anymore. I use games to calm down. I use games to try and state my anger on days I'm wound up. My day job, I'm a chef. I get wound up like crazy when I've been at work. Because, yeah, I'm gonna say it, people infuriate me. I mean, people come into the restaurant and they don't know what they're ordering, or they order something and they say none of this. Well, that food item doesn't come with that. Read the menu, please, or things like that. Or they come up with a stupid order, or people with bullshit allergies. Yes, I'm getting into personal problems. Sorry about that, but you have to understand that this is stuff I deal with. But yeah, but when people come with bullshit allergies and things like that, and I have to be like, well, I have to deal with it. Well, no, we scream. all the chefs I've worked with have kicked up fusses about shit like that. I don't know a single chef that hasn't dealt with something like that. But I come home on a day off. Yeah, I'm gonna load up a video game. I might load up Overwatch for a bit. Do some competitive matches on there and just randomly kill a bunch of people. I might load up, I don't know, like one of the Assassin's Creed games and just go around randomly killing the people I'm allowed to kill. And things like that. World of Warcraft, StarCraft, all these games I go on to try and relax, to try and take that edge away from life. And a bunch of these parents say they're making our kids violent. These games are 18 rated games. If you don't want your kids playing them, don't buy the game for the kid. Simple as that. But, again, that's more a digression situation than anything else. And that's not necessarily going to make someone evil. So, now is it? It could, but it's not. And it's not even a necessary evil either. It's not an evil that's necessary in the world. It's an evil people have made evil. So there's the thing. There's something that people have made evil because they don't like it. It's fine if you don't fucking like it. Absolutely fucking fine. Don't ruin it for other people. Don't. I know the argument can be used for other things I've said that are pure evil, but then that's arguing with pathetic semantics and shit like that. Video games aren't evil. Video games are stress relief. Video games are fun. There's even competitive video gaming leagues. How can that be evil? No. See, I don't think video games can be classed down as a evil thing in the world. It's people who want to control you. See, there's something evil. There's something that can define as someone being evil. In the D&D world, in Dungeons and Dragons, and things like that, you have these spells. Charm Person, Command, Friendship, where you can alter someone's mind. Now, majority of times when that's used in a D&D game, it's used to make someone stop attacking you, or to get past some guards who are going to be hassling you for too long, and you just need to get past them, and you just don't want to deal with them. A real-world application of something like that is incredibly deadly. It's destructive and harmful. So oppose this. So we go back to an earlier podcast I did talking about superpowers and their drawbacks. So this is a superpower I didn't really talk about too much. I did a little bit because telepathy, and to an extent, can fall into that line. But being able to make people do what you want them to do. For context on this one, let me put the sense of how it is in Dungeons and Dragons. So these are spells. Only certain classes can cast them, and they sometimes revive somatic, which is basically gestures with hands, verbal, some use of words, or physical components or material components, like something like incense to burn or something like that. So we take those rules into this equation. I don't want it just to have the sense of like Purple Man from Jessica Jones, where he can just tell people to do something and they'll do it. Which, again, they use that power correctly. Random person would be evil with this kind of power. He wouldn't just be like, oh yeah, I'm going to go to Iran and tell them to deactivate all their nuclear missiles and surrender so we can win peacefully. No. The average person, if they got a power like that, wouldn't do shit like that. Why? Why would you want to do something like that? Put yourself in harm's way? Nah. Tell people what you want to do. Have a handful of servants and things like that. Yes, I'm easily rearing around to that. The average male would probably find a way to use this power to bed a lot of women. If they're gay, a lot of men. The average person may walk into a bank and ask the person behind the teller just to give them all the money in the safe. Or that's in their till. You can go into a fucking store and do that. Albeit you're probably not going to get as much from a store nowadays, but still. What about walking into somewhere like the White House or number 10 Downing Street? Say that, have that power. Oh, can you just excuse me? I'd just like to go in, please. That person just moves out of the way and lets you in. Go in and kill the president. Kill the prime minister. You see all the evil things that can be done with a power like that. And I'm sure not, and I know not everybody is going to be thinking, oh, that's what I'm going to do. I am just giving some very, very extreme examples. But they're deemed as evil examples, aren't they? Walking in to the White House to kill the president with this kind of power? Pure evil. Using this power to make women sleep with you? Evil. Yes. It's a judgment of will. It's a judgment of character and a judgment of who you are. I can rant on about this for a long time. But I'd ultimately just be circling the same situation. But that's the side of it with that kind of power. You'd have this power and you'd be able to do whatever you want simply just by telling the right person. It's interesting, isn't it? Let's talk about some of the other things that make people evil. Some of the other big things. I've not talked too much about murder, have I? Murder is such a swing one way, swing the other of whether it's evil or good or evil. Yes, I know, with things like 007 and like certain spies and that whole license to kill thing. But, and I personally don't know if that's a true thing, real thing or not, whether people actually have this license to kill, can kill someone and get away with it just because they have a license. I don't. I don't want to think it's a real thing. But, say for whatever's sake, and say we're in the James Bond or Archer world universe or whatever. Fine. People have these licenses to kill. And say they can only get these licenses through government agents, as a government agent and spies and things like that. Fine. Have you ever noticed that in these kind of situations, a lot of the time they don't kill just for the sake of it? You have a license to kill. You're not going to go off on a killing spree with it. It would be the same situation of having a driver's license and then, say, getting absolutely hammered and going for a drive. They'd take the license away, wouldn't they? It's not so much that. It's they just avoid killing certain times. They'll use non-lethal ways of taking someone down and things like that. And they'll kill only if they have to. Is it right? Is it evil? This is where murder can be such on the fence about what it is. Yes, it's a wrong thing to do. You should not murder someone else for whatever reason. Yeah, I'm gonna leave that. I can add more to that personally, but I'm not gonna divulge certain shit off my chest, not on here, anyways. But yeah, so you shouldn't murder anybody else. There should be no reason, regardless, on why you should kill somebody. But killing happens. You're in the army. You go off to another country to invade or to stop some terrorists or whatever. In a firefight, are you going to be worried about not killing somebody when you're in a firefight like that? I don't think you would. I got friends who are in the military. I've got friends who have served. I've never broached this question with them or talked to them about this kind of stuff. Maybe it's because it'd probably be a dark situation or dark thing to talk about. But I imagine in that situation, they're not worried about, oh, we just need to take them down non-lethally, shoot the legs and arms kind of thing. No, this guy's shooting at me with intent to kill me. I'm going to kill him. I want to kill him first. Is murder wrong there? Exactly. So, what have I done? I've gone around in a circle to talk about these things and what could make someone evil. Yes, I used a lot of real world experiences in this situation, but you have to. You can't just you can't just kind of take a comic book context from it, because in a comic book, it's not real. It's not in the real world. But to understand it, you do need to be more open about it. The whole world needs to be more open about it. You need to understand that things like rape in a fantasy game happens. Just because the DM doesn't talk about it doesn't mean it's probably not happened somewhere in the world. Murder happens in these fantasy worlds. Games in the fantasy world, they do. You kill people in it. Torture happens in these worlds. People are evil. There are evil people out there in this world that people create. A person isn't wrong for creating these things in their own worlds. They're doing it because they're trying to give this experience of some, not necessarily a reality. You create these worlds to escape reality in a sense, but some sort of reason that these people need to be stopped. So, yeah, you have to kind of see it in that form and sense. Can't just rely on, oh, this guy's evil, you need to go and stop him, and the guy's just waiting in his evil castle for you to turn up to kill him. He's going to be busy. So yes, I'm going to kind of wrap this up a little bit now. And I guess what I'm truly trying to say in this point in Mart area is you can't have a go at these pop culture things when they bring up stuff like murdering, torture, rape, molestation, and things like that. Simply because, well, they're trying to portray this evil person. They're trying to portray that you have to go stop this person. And here are the reasons why. So, what are your thoughts on all this, guys? What are you guys thinking about all this evil stuff? Are you feeling that maybe pop culture is going too far when it goes into these kind of things? That things like The Boys or Sin City, Punisher, and other things like that just need to be taken out of this situation completely? Or do you agree with me? Or do you think that we need to be more open and be talking more about this kind of stuff and why it needs to stay in pop culture? Why it needs to be more open? Yes, not for kids. Not for kids. But for us adults who are trying to live an adult life and things like that. I want to hear what you guys have to say. Okay? And if you guys haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. Yeah? We sign somewhere around about here. Probably here. You can click to subscribe. I have a couple sets of videos here and here that are going to be talking about, that are not talking, but be links to the Crit Takers D&D games that we recorded for lockdown, as well as the link to the link to the playlist that this podcast, A Day in the Tavern. So please click them. Please also go to our Facebook pages, Crit Takers and A Day in the Tavern. Go give them a like so you can follow us all the way through. You know, because why not? Why not follow us? We're a bunch of crazy musical geeky people. We're awesome. So, cut this one short again because it's just me trying to see if I can wrangle someone in next week to have someone to talk back, feedback with. So, keep well, guys. You all are important to everybody and somebody. And please remember to keep drinking. Until next time. See ya.